Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and tonight is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD. I see that I have a number of familiar names on my board. I'm glad to see that those of you that have been here before are coming back to get some more help. And I hope that means you're finding some use out of this. For the new people that are here, and actually for you people that are returning, welcome. I'm glad to see you all here. I didn't send out the notice of our meeting or the email where I announced that we're going to have it until this morning. So we actually have a lower turnout, even though I have a schedule that I put out weeks in advance, but people seem to wait for me to send out that email. So for those of you that are here, you may have a chance to get all of your questions answered this evening, although we'll see what happens as the webinar goes on. For those of you that are new and for you people returning, there's a couple ways that you get to participate. Number one, you can write a question. You can go bold, especially if this is your first time. You can go bold and write me a question. And where you do that is on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. I think that's on the right-hand side on your computers. There's a chat box, and you can write your question to me there. I do want you to know that as you do that, that I ask that you only, let's see. Oops, I don't know if I got that set up correctly here. Just a minute. So I ask that you only hit the enter key when you get your whole question complete. You should be aware that each time you hit the enter key to possibly create paragraphs, well, it sends a complete question to me. And it gets hard to chase around the parts of your question on my side if you hit the enter key multiple times. So what I request is that you actually just write your question as one long run-on paragraph, okay? I have no problem with that. Not too long, because our format works better for shorter questions here tonight as well, too, all right? The other thing about that chat box, there's a couple icons down there that you can use. You can use one that looks like a question mark, and then there's one that looks like two chat windows on top of each other. I prefer that you use the chat window one. That's where most people put their questions, and that tends to be what I go through first. And I tend not to look at the question mark one until I'm done with all the ones that are in that double chat window. Okay. All right. And then for those of you that, and then be aware, the other way to participate is hear the questions as I read them out loud. And for those of you that are in the live version tonight, I also post them so you can see them on your screen, although they don't show up in the recorded version. So therefore, I will read them out loud so people that hear the recorded version of this understand what we're talking about. All right. But as part of that second way of participating, hear what responses I give to other people's questions. Okay. And so there's always I tend to explain things quite a bit. Some ways I might get a little long-winded, but I think always people tend to get useful information out of these as well. All right. And then finally, as usual, I am creating a recording tonight. If everything goes as planned, and really it has been, we've been having a good streak here. I plan on editing up that recording later tonight and then creating a summary of it early in the morning and sending it out to you in an email. So look for that email somewhere between 9:30 a.m., sometimes earlier, but I try to get it done by at least 9 to 9:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, Austin, Texas time, to get it on its way to you. All right. And when you get that email, you'll have an opportunity to sign up for next week's webinar. So we have one next week and the weekend after as well. If you think that there are other people that would get benefit from hearing the recording or from signing up for future webinars, share that email. It's not exclusive to people that sign up here. Share it with anyone you think might get some benefit. All right. All right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. Hello. It's either Ayla or Allah. And I have two people in my life. One goes by Ayla and the other one goes by Allah, although I'm not sure if they use the same spelling there. But anyhow, so I'm sorry if I got your name incorrect there. But hi, Dr. Ross. On the days where I'm feeling especially bad with flu or just under the weather from Lyme, Barton, Babesia, I tend to skip doses on my herbal medicine because I feel as though I cannot take it. Should I persevere through the symptoms or skipping / lowering the occasional herbal dose? Okay. All right. So it depends on, I think what you mean herbal medicines, I'm going to interpret that as meaning the herbal antibiotics like Cryptolepis or cat's claw or Pseudoacuta or Hootenea. black walnut, whatever it is that you're using to treat your tick-borne infections. I assume in my response that that's what you mean by the herbal medicines. All right. So when it comes, so let me give you some background on that then. So in terms of what happens when you don't take your herbal or prescription antibiotics, we have to look at how fast the germs replicate. So by some estimates, Borrelia, which is the Lyme germ, will replicate about every 4 weeks to every 8 weeks. All right. So it's slow growing. So if you stop your medicines for a day to even a week, maybe 2 weeks, it doesn't matter because the germ is so slow growing that it's not going to come back quickly. Okay. All right. On the other hand, Bartonella and Babesia, those two infections have a more rapid growth cycle. And so they tend to replicate themselves about every 24 hours. So if you come off of your herbal antibiotics during that period, the germs can tend to grow back. Okay. All right. So what I tend to recommend for people that tend to have a lot of difficulty handling their dosing, daily dosing of their herbal antibiotics, is to try to drop back your dose to a level that you could take every day and tolerate it well. So for instance, if you're currently having difficulty taking 5 drops twice a day, whatever herbal antibiotics you're using, then you might even want to consider dropping it back to 1 or 2 drops twice a day instead of 5 drops twice a day. Okay, it's by trial and error you're going to find out what is a dose that you can tolerate that's not totally clobbering you. And I would try to find a dosing amount that you can take daily that doesn't knock you out. Okay, that would be my recommendation to you, and also talk it over with your physicians as well too. Okay, all right. Good luck to you. Oh, and then I should also say, those symptoms you're having, the flu-like symptoms and being under the weather, are due to the fluctuations usually of the cytokines made by your white blood cells. So for those of you that hear my webinars regularly, I talk about cytokines quite often. But for those of you that do, let me just do a quick explanation. So whenever you get infections or you get mold toxins in you, your immune system will react against them. And some of the white blood cells that see these germs will react by making inflammatory chemicals called cytokines. All right. And, when we had during the middle of COVID, that's what we heard a lot about, was people having excess cytokines. All right. So your immune cells make these cytokines, and they're good and bad. On the good side, the increased cytokines that are made cause more white blood cells to be made. They draw those white blood cells to where the infection is, and they help the white blood cells work better. That's good. Okay. But in certain conditions, like in long COVID, for instance, or in chronic Borrelia or chronic Babesia or chronic Bartonella or chronic mold toxicity, where you got all these mold toxins flying around you, the immune system is not going to be able to get those conditions under control in a certain percentage of people, not everyone, but a certain percentage. And it's going to keep trying harder and harder, and it's going to make too many cytokines. And those cytokines are what make you feel like crap. Okay, they give you your flu symptoms. They make it so you can't think. They give you fatigue. They cause hormonal disturbances, etc. And so that up and down variation that you get also can be managed by taking things that regulate your cytokines. Two things I strongly recommend, especially for people that are having symptoms such as you are, is to get on a liposomal variety of curcumin. Curcumin is a component of the Indian seasoning or the food seasoning called turmeric. It's the active component, and it gets inside your white blood cell cytokine factories and tries to block the production line. Okay. All right. And then the other thing I like to complement that with in people that have regular ongoing symptoms like you're having is I like them to take a liposomal glutathione. All right. So, and the reason I like liposomal varieties of both curcumin and glutathione is both curcumin and glutathione are, curcumin is not that well absorbed. Glutathione gets destroyed in your gut unless you prepare it in a way that it can be absorbed. Okay. All right. I'll tell you what products I recommend here in a minute. So in terms of the glutathione, what it does is it blocks the signals that tell white blood cells to make cytokines. And those signals are oxidizing agents. Glutathione is a very strong antioxidant. So one of its roles is being an antioxidant in the body. The other thing is it is made in large concentrations in the liver where it detoxes stuff, okay? And it's also made in every one of our cells, and its jobs in every one of our cells is to repair damage that happens on the inside of the cell. But it's quite effective at lowering oxidizing agents that tell white blood cells to make cytokines. So if you use curcumin, which blocks the factory on the inside, the white blood cell factory is on the inside, and you pair it with liposomal glutathione, which is on the outside, swatting back all those orders that are coming at the white blood cells, telling them to make cytokines, you get better control, all right? So the liposomal product I like for glutathione, mainly I like it because they have really good research data showing good absorption, okay? That's the Research Nutritionals product, which is called Trifortify. It comes in 2 flavors, and it also comes in different sizes, all right? And then for my liposomal or curcumin, I prefer a product made by Thorne called curcumin phytosome. Phytosome is their liposomal curcumin, all right? And that is a 500 milligram pill that you would take 3 times a day, okay? And you can find both of those at my supplement store. I'll probably show you that later, but Marty Ross MD supplements at treatlyme.com. I usually do a screen share and introduce my store too, but I just don't feel like doing it right now. All right. So anyhow, good luck to you. I hope that gave you some things to work with there. Actually, let me just, I am. I'm going to do a screen share. Let me see here. All right, so this is my Lyme disease information site, Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. And the one thing I'd have you take a look at here is I have a guide on how to control cytokines, all right? And it's in my Herxheimer and cytokine section here. And there's this article called Control Cytokines, a guide to fix Lyme symptoms and the immune system. And I discuss in this article the glutathione and the curcumin. I also have some other recommendations in there as well too, but the core things I recommend are the glutathione and the curcumin. Okay? All right. All right. Let's see here. Hello, Sonia. Let me get your message up here. So hi, Sonia. Sonia says, hi, Dr. Ross. This is Sonia Farrell. I had Lyme for 38 years, and your treatment helped me get over it. I'm glad to hear that. I'm sorry that you're here right now. So let's see what else is going on. I mean, I'm sorry that you're having a reason to show up here again, but I'm glad to have helped you. I was left with a damaged sleep center in my brain and a damaged nervous system, which mitochondria treatment didn't help. I had COVID in mid-June, and I'm going to be evaluated for long-term COVID. Testing in May showed that I have both an old case of Epstein-Barr as well as a new autoimmune case of it, which put me at high risk for long-term COVID. The most troubling symptom I'm experiencing is that even with Ambien and a slew of supplements and gabapentin, I am only able to sleep between 0 to 3 hours a night. I'm wondering if long-term COVID is different in people who have had Lyme, and if you have any ideas as to how to treat my current severe inability to sleep. I can only sleep if, in addition to Ambien, I also take Tylenol PM. Is this a viable approach? Otherwise, I only sleep an hour or so a night. I will be having blood tests in a couple of weeks to test for inflammation. Okay, so Sonia, there's a lot of things you mentioned here. So first of all, I'm sorry to hear that you have had a bad outcome from having had COVID. And I'll show you in a little bit. There's a whole protocol I've developed for treating long COVID. The trouble is with long COVID, there's multiple things that go haywire in it. And there's not a one size fits all, although there's enough things that happen. You have to address it from multiple angles. Okay. All right. So 2 of the big things that happen when you get COVID is it leads to a marked disturbance of the gut microbiome. It leads to changes in the type of bacteria that are in there. And one of the big changes that's been documented by a research named Dr. I got blank on her. Oh, Sabine Hazan. Sabine she's a GI doc that does a lot of research on what goes on in the microbiome. And she was able to show that in people that have had COVID, that they lose a lot of what is known as bifidobacterium, which is one of the keystone bacteria in our intestines. All right. Now, keep in mind that the intestinal tract and the microbiome, the germs that make up that, and all the chemicals that they produce are basically in control of your brain, your immune system, your heart, your lungs, your liver. So there's what we call the gut microbiome heart axis, and the gut microbiome brain axis, and the gut microbiome immune system axis. Okay. So if you get marked disturbances in the makeup of healthy bacteria within the microbiome, and with long COVID people do, that's just one of the things that happens. All right. It's going to make it so that you're not getting the correct signals from the brain to help with sleep. Okay. And there's a couple things that happen with, I'm going to talk a minute what you can do about your gut microbiome, because you need to do some things about that, because you need to change the signaling from your gut going to your brain that controls whether you sleep or not. Okay. In addition to the microbiome disturbances, another thing that has been shown to happen is the gut's ability to make tryptophan, which is turned into serotonin in the brain. And if you have enough serotonin in the brain, it helps your mood, but it also helps with sleep as well too. You get marked disturbances in the ability of the gut to make 5-hydroxytryptophan. All right. So there's two things I'm going to suggest, and then I'm going to suggest some more things for you. Okay. But number one, I would look at getting on some 5-hydroxytryptophan, also called 5-HTP. And I would look at doing, and actually, I would take 100 milligrams twice a day. And in addition, I would take 200 milligrams before sleep. Okay. Now, the reason I have you take a bigger dose of it before sleep is higher dose 5-hydroxytryptophan also just by itself can be a good sleep medicine. All right. But I want to make up for probably one of the disturbances you're having, which is your gut probably is not making enough 5-hydroxytryptophan. So you can supplement 5-hydroxytryptophan, which is turned into that tryptophan up in the brain. Okay. All right. Number two. Okay. So one, gut disturbances, the gut stops making enough tryptophan. Okay. Number two, you got to fix the bacteria. All right. And there's a research protocol. There was a group of physicians that came together about a year and a half ago and started looking at a protocol to treat long COVID from multiple angles using a functional medicine approach. And the one thing that they did, and they had good outcomes. They had like 50% of people that did their protocol for 3 months had basically got well. I think it was even higher than that. I think it was like 60 or 70% got all the way well, right? My protocol is based on their protocol. So I'm going to show you my protocol in a minute, all right? But one of the things that they really talk about in their work, and I talk about in my work, is rebuild your microbiome. And so one of the things to do that is to get on a or a spore-forming probiotic. Spore-forming probiotics do not naturally, or bacteria that do not naturally occur in our intestines, but once they get in our intestines, they promote the remaining healthy bacteria that are in there to grow and do better, basically. All right. And I like using spore-forming probiotics because they, as spore formers, they can get through the acid in your stomach and actually get down into your intestines. And so the product that they were using in their protocol, and so therefore I recommend as part of mine, is called Megaspore Biotic. And so I would do a couple pills of that once a day. The other thing I would do is get on a good prebiotic fiber. So prebiotic fibers are non-digestible sugar fibers from plants that we don't digest, but our healthy bacteria love in our intestines, and they gobble that stuff up and it helps them do better. All right. So the product for that is something called Megapre, Megapre. And that probiotic, I think you go at 2 pills 1 time a day on that one as well too. All right. All right. And I'll show you the whole protocol here in a minute. All right. All right. So I would focus on, in terms of your sleep, at least going ahead and trying to rebuild the gut microbiome. Number 2, make up for one of the chemicals that the data does show is not made in adequate amounts by the intestines after COVID, especially in long COVID, which is the tryptophan. You can take the 5-hydroxytryptophan that I talked about. All right. And then the other thing, in terms of your question here about Tylenol PM in addition to Ambien, yeah, go ahead and do it. So what the PM in Tylenol PM is, it's an antihistamine. It's the same thing as Benadryl, basically. And so it is okay to use it. It's non-addicting. The only difficulty is some people get a big hangover from being on Benadryl, all right? But if you're tolerating it fine, there is no problem with taking it along with the Tylenol PM, all right? And so that I would suggest that. It looks like you're still working with providers on other medicines, but if you find benefit from Ambien and Tylenol PM and you may not necessarily need the other medicines, then by all means, go ahead and do that, okay? All right. All right. Other things that you might want to consider as part of the long COVID protocol are ways of modulating your immune system to work better too, so that they might get the F-star bar back in under control. And one of those things that I like working with is a peptide called BPC-157. It can regulate the immune system, and in addition, it is anti-inflammatory and can correct damage created by having had COVID in you. And that I would do as a 500 milligram pill 3 times a day. There was another thing I was going to say about your immune system support here. I'm blanking on it here. And yeah, those are some things that I would start to look at. I know you're working with other providers that are going to help you look at this too. So let me show you my protocol, because I think it's going to do it. There's a lot of good information in there beyond even what I just described here as well too. Okay. Oh, I know what I was going to mention. Look, low dose naltrexone seems to give benefit too. And the low dose naltrexone, and I can't remember where you were on it before or not, naltrexone works on the immune system by helping what are known as T regulatory cells to work better at controlling what is known as Th1, Th2, and Th17 inflammation. Okay, so Tregs are these master cells that control Th1, which are the cells that fight viruses and chronic tick-borne infections. It controls Th2, which is your allergy and antibody cells, all right? And it controls Th17, which are the cells that are your frontline infection cells that fight germs that haven't been identified by the body as they break through your mucous membranes and through your skin. Okay, so that's Th17. And so if you can get your Tregs to work better, which is what low-dose naltrexone does, you get better harmony between Th1, Th2, and Th17. That also can help with a lot of this as well too. All right. And then finally, one of the big things that this protocol that these specialists came up with that has been shown to be really helpful is getting on a clean diet, getting on more of a whole foods type diet with limited animal products, basically. All right. So, and I know you know how to do that, but those are some things that have been found to be helpful as well too. So let me just do a quick screen share here for you. All right. So in terms of COVID, take a look at, or long COVID, take a look at my infection treatment plans here, and take a look at this article called Solving the Puzzle, the Ross long COVID support protocol. Okay. And basically, you're going to see a lot of things I recommend. I've talked about it already. One is getting on a plant-based diet. One is getting on restorative sleep. The other is starting to move as much as you can. Stress modification, good. Good social connections are good. And then there's a bunch of things they recommend to support mitochondria, as well as to correct all of the abnormalities that I mentioned up here. Anyhow, it's a very long protocol. I'm not going to go through all of it today. You poor people have listened to me talk long enough about it already, meaning I know others of you have other things you want to move to. But Sonia, take a look at this. There's just a lot here about the stuff that we know that gets out of whack, okay? And I think you can get some useful information here as well, okay? All right. And then in terms of some of those products I recommended, so you can find the Mega Pre here. This is the Mega Pre. Okay. You can also, which is the prebiotic. In terms of the spore-forming probiotic I recommended, it's called Mega Spore Biotic. And that's it here, okay? And then I don't know if you have tried BPC-157 before or not, but it is a peptide that's naturally made by the stomach that has just great effects on correcting tissue damage and balancing out the immune system. And you can find information about that here as well too, okay? All right. Oops. I do believe I forgot to screen share on that. Oh, shoot. I'll do it real quickly here. All right. So we go back here again. I don't think it did it. There we go. Okay. So hold on. I just want to make sure. Okay. So that's the BPC-157 again. Okay. That's my Megaspore. Okay, and then here is the Mega Pre. All right. Oops, there we go. All right, there you go. Good luck, Sonia. The last part of your question was, do people with Lyme tend to do worse with long COVID? No, I haven't seen a relationship that people that have Lyme or had active Lyme have any greater chance of getting long COVID. I don't consider it a risk factor for getting long COVID. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Colleen. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Experiencing hair loss, weakness, fatigue, low energy. If our ferritin levels are low, 13, but iron total is within range, 70, iron binding capacity is 362, and saturation is 19%. Should we take ferritin or iron? Thank you for these incredible, helpful sessions. So, so the most accurate measurement of your iron stores in the body, the storage form of iron, which reflects most on what's going to happen with hair loss, basically, is ferritin. Okay. So I know you've given me these other iron numbers, but the one that is most sensitive, that is involved, that can tell us whether you need more iron, is the ferritin. So if ferritin is under 40 and somebody has significant hair loss, then it's time to increase your iron intake, basically. Okay. And so and then you got to worry about which kind of iron is going to give you the best absorption. And also iron, unfortunately, can sometimes lead to constipation. The product I'd like best for that, because of good absorption, it tends not to lead to constipation, is a product made by Thorne called Ferrasorb. Ferrasorb. Okay. So I do carry that at my store. But that's the product I have found that has the least chance of leading to problems with taking the iron, basically. And I usually have people take 2 pills 1 time a day on that. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Kelly. Let's see. Hi, Marty. Got my Igenix results! Exclamation point. I'm glad you got those. That's good. That's good. Let's see. Borrelia IgM was negative, except for indeterminate band 23, and IgG was positive for 66 and 93, and indeterminate for 41 and 58. My naturopath sums this all up as weak positive for Lyme. The Babesia IgM was negative, but IgG positive for microbiome. I definitely resonate with Babesia symptoms in particular and suspect that COVID may have reactivated parts of it that were not already chronic, such as my longstanding neurologic issues. You've shared that the black fly that bit my face at 2 years old could have transmitted Lyme. Does that mean it also could have transmitted Babesia? Assuming this wasn't all some microscopic deer tick, overall thoughts on next steps, given I'm having significant GI issues and signs of organ deficiency on top of chronic fatigue and continued severe OCD. All right. So first of all, I'm sorry to hear you're having a tough time. So I don't know if flies transmit Babesia. I just don't know. I haven't seen data, nor have I gone looking for the data on that. So I can't tell you about that for sure. Okay. I just honestly don't know. What I will share with you is that 50% of people that have tick-borne infections do not remember a tick bite, even though it's a tick that gives it to the majority of people. All right. So it's not uncommon that you can have these infections and not have memory of a tick bite, because a lot of times what spreads the germs the easiest are the baby forms of the tick. And those baby forms of the tick are called nymphs, so the size of a poppy seed. You really can't even see them sometimes when they bite you. Okay. All right. So, but I don't honestly know whether a fly biting you when you were 2 years old would have transmitted that Babesia. I just don't know that for sure. Okay. And then in terms of my interpretation of your the Borrelia Immunoblot. So, clearly, so what an indeterminate means is that they are seeing some color in the test tube, but not enough compared to what's known as a control tube to tell for sure whether you're making antibodies or not. Okay. They just can't tell. It could be that you're making a weak amount of antibodies that is barely being detected, or it could be that it's a test artifact. There's something showing up on a test strip or the test tube in this case that shouldn't be showing up. All right. And then in terms of the your IgG result being positive at 93 may mean something, and indeterminate 41 may also mean something too. So when we interpret what makes a immunoblot positive is if you have either on IgM or IgG, and I know Igenix has slightly different standards in this, but the standards I use are being positive at 2 of the following 6 positions, either on IgM by itself or on IgG by itself. You don't put the 2 results together, basically. Okay. All right. So the 6 bands you worry about, or the 6 positions you worry about, are 23-25. Let's see, 23-25, 31, 34, 39, 41, and 83-93, or they're reporting it as 93 now. Okay. All right. Those are the 6 important proteins. So those are proteins that we test to see if you have antibodies against proteins, and these proteins have a certain weight. That's what the 93 is, 93 kilodalton, for instance. Okay. All right. If you have antibodies against at least 2 of those, that's positive. On your IgG, you have antibodies for sure against 93. So that's 1. And then your 41 is indeterminate, which may be antibodies or test artifact. Okay. And so here's where it gets a little tricky. And this is where it gets into the art of medicine. It is possible with the Immunoblot, although Immunoblot's good at picking, it's a very sensitive test. It can pick up most of these chronic infections that are there, but it's not perfect. Okay. It picks up about 95% of them. it is possible you have these infections in you, but because they're so active, they suppress the immune system's ability to generate the antibodies that we're trying to measure. And so sometimes when somebody has enough symptoms that suggest a tick-borne infection, and they have a test that looks like yours does, I too will call that a weakly positive test. But I only make that determination of it being weakly positive if I know enough about what all your symptoms tell me to. Okay. All right. So if you have enough symptoms that look like chronic Borrelia and you have a test like you have, I would call that a weakly positive test. All right. All right. Then in terms of where you should start, it's hard for me to say. And the reason it's hard for me to say, this is what I used to spend an hour and a half with people trying to figure out, right? It's complex. I would need to be able to take a detailed history from you, find out how you've responded to other things before, get a better sense of what all of your symptoms are. And so I can't say where the best place is for you. You might, as a starting point, want to take a look at my Ross Lyme support protocol and pay attention to all the steps, like how do you control cytokines, using an adaptogen called ashwagandha, taking things for sleep, being on a good multivitamin, eating a whole foods, plant-based diet. All of those steps that are part of my chronic Lyme disease protocol are critical that you do them. And in addition, look at the sections on what I have for herbal antibiotics for Borrelia and herbal antibiotics for Babesia. Okay, all right. The other thing I would point out, and so I'm going to show you that here in a minute. Let me go here and just show that to you because I have another comment too. Okay, so take a look. My protocol is right here, the Ross protocol. Okay, and again, the protocol is made up of a section on sleep, diet, what to do to get a healthy intestinal microbiome, exercise, taking things to lower cytokines, being on something to help your body deal with stress called adaptogens, correcting your hormonal problems, dealing with good multivitamins, being on some herbs that can help with detoxification. And then down here, I talk about Lyme, yeast, and Bartonella and Babesia infections. Okay. All right. Now, in both of these, I believe I made an addition recently. Yeah. So in both the Bartonella and Babesia section, as well as the Borrelia section above, I came up with a new protocol that you can use to treat Babesia, Bartonella, and Borrelia together at the same time. Okay. And that would be to use Cryptolepis along with Japanese knotweed, along with liposomal cinnamon, clove, and oregano. Okay. And if you want to know how I came up with this newer regimen to treat all three infections at the same time, you can click on my best herbal antibiotic plans for Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia article here. And this article reviewed some of the latest science that has come out from laboratories telling us what herbs do what. And we now have a big expanded idea of what the different herbs do. And I even put a whole table in here that gave you an idea. For instance, does Alcornia treat Babesia? Well, yes, it does. Okay. Does Cryptolepis treat Babesia? Yes. And for Bartonella, it treats growing and persister Bartonella. And for Borrelia, it treats growing and persister Borrelia. Okay. So anyhow, take a look at this. This is a good review of the various herbal antibiotics that you can use. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Kelly. Hello, Carol. Hi, Dr. Ross. My naturopath has included Dr. Ross Lyme Tonic. I don't know what they meant by that. So first of all, I don't produce any supplements, right? I sell other people's products. And so maybe what your naturopath is referring to are the various individual products that I would recommend to treat whatever infection you have. So I'm not sure what they're talking about. I'm sorry about that. Kelly says, oh, shoot, am I allowed to call you Marty? Absolutely. In my practice, I had everybody call me by my first name if they felt comfortable doing that. And in my webinars and in my Lyme support group, my Lyme United membership support group, where you can have more interactions with me than even here, I have everybody call me by my first name. Not everyone does, but I'm very open to that, and actually like when people call me by my first name. So no problems there. Okay. All right. Let's see, Thomas. I see you wrote me a question, but it just starts by saying I'm dying of Lyme disease and Bartonella from 2022 Igenics, and then it doesn't say any. Oh, here we go. I think I found your second part. All right. Let me see if we can do something with that. See, here's your second part. I have severe shortness of breath, neurologic symptoms, numbness in my feet, spasms, fatigue. I could go on. I live in a mold-infected house, and I am desperate. I cannot find a way out. Further northern works. Your name, have tried it. You name it, I have tried it. I'm cannot sleep, fevers. Any suggestions would be gratefully appreciated. Thomas, I wish I could just tell you what to do. That's a lot going on for me to decipher in just a short question like that. Okay. The one thing that you probably have addressed, but if you have not, when mold is possibly it is possible that even though you have tested positive for Lyme, it is possible, or if you have tested positive, or even if you have Lyme, based on testing, it does not mean Lyme infection is causing your problems. I just want to be clear about that, okay? So I have found situations where people test positive for Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, and when I talk to them in a visit, I figure that I'd learn as I ask them a bunch of questions that they may have been bitten years ago and were living a long, fine, healthy life, no problem at all. And then they moved into that house with mold toxicity, and that's when they got sick. And it's because, and the reason that they got diagnosed with these other infections is that they tested positive and they have all the symptoms that look like Lyme and tick-borne infections, when in fact, it may be all the excess cytokines that get created from having mold toxicity that give you a syndrome that look like tick-borne infections, but really it's mold toxicity, okay? And I've had a number of times when all I did with people, when I took their history, and it was obvious to me that was probably, they got sick in the house with mold toxins, I sometimes will do nothing about the tick-borne infections and just go after their mold toxins and bind them all up, even for 6 months, a year. And I've gotten a number of people 100% well without doing anything about the tick-borne infections, because it is possible that your immune system that is making those antibodies that give you the positive test took care of it. All right. And that the main problem is mold toxicity. So I don't know that's your situation for sure. I have no idea. But the one thing I would urge you to look at is, did you, in terms of your history, is it pretty clear if it was when you moved into the place with mold toxins and you got sick? Okay. And if you did, that's where I would focus your efforts. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Z. Hi, Dr. Ross. Can you please speak to women and hormones when it comes to Lyme treatment? I feel like there isn't much information about women and hormones, especially when it comes to herbal antibiotics. Thanks so much. So I don't know. I guess I would want to know a little bit more about what you're suggesting. Okay, but let me just say this. So when you have tick-borne infections, as I've mentioned earlier tonight, there is an overproduction of those cytokines. Okay, all right. And there's a part of the brain that is in control of all of your hormonal systems. So your adrenals, your thyroid, your ovaries, and your testicles if you're a man. Okay. All right. And whether those organs, those hormonal systems produce enough or too little of their hormones. All right. And that area of the brain is an area called the hypothalamus pituitary. The hypothalamus is the part of the brain that interprets whether there's enough of those hormones. And the pituitary, then based on signals from the hypothalamus, sends out chemicals telling the thyroid to work, telling the ovaries to work, et cetera. Okay. So the hormone, and so one of the things that happens is these cytokines effectively, the hypothalamus effectively gets drunk on cytokines. All right. Figuratively, I should say. And you know how a drunk is. The drunks don't interpret things correctly, right? So it is very possible that when somebody has tick-borne infections, that in addition to having problems with the thyroid and low adrenals, that they may also have problems with hormones not working correctly, and specifically the ovaries. And so the ovaries are directed to make their estrogen and progesterone from two hormones made by the pituitary called follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And one place to start your evaluation as to whether you might have estrogen progesterone deficiencies is to also get a luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone level. Okay. And then, as I would in anyone that might have symptoms related to low estrogen or progesterone, if you have enough estrogen, or I would test for estrogen levels, and I would also test for progesterone levels, all right? But how you interpret progesterone and how you interpret estrogen has to be taken a little more loosely than the standard medical community does. So the standard medical community, if you test for your progesterone level, as an example, there's a normal range, and they automatically assume if you're somewhere in this normal range that you're normal. All right. And that's wrong. All right. Because the way that normal is defined is we draw hundreds, thousands of healthy people off the street that identify as normal, and we test them. And then we see what is the range that the levels are. So, and then we automatically decide that we call normal the range that 95% of people fall with their progesterone level, as an example, okay? And we artificially say, the bell-shaped curve, you probably heard of that before. We artificially say that the 2.5% at this end of the bell-shaped curve and 2.5% of people at this other end of the bell-shaped curve are abnormal, all right? All right. So it's an artificial designation, okay? So it's a population-based normal range, all right? One other problem. Each person, each of us has different individual normal ranges for ourselves. So even though you may fall in the normal range and it looks like you've got good levels of progesterone, that might not be your normal, all right? Your normal may require something higher than that. And the only way you can determine that is by spending time with a physician that has enough knowledge about progesterone, enough knowledge about estrogen and this kind of symptoms they might give, and can help determine that, yeah, maybe your testing looks normal, but you've got hot flashes going on, or you've got a lot of irritability going on. Maybe this is an estrogen progesterone deficiency problem. Okay. All right. And so I can't figure that out with you here, but the one thing I would suggest is get adequate testing, and then find a functional medicine doctor that is knowledgeable in hormones and see if they can help you look at those. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Z. Hello, Kara. Let's see. I have been on a protocol that matches with what you have for Bartonella on your website. Methylene blue, rifampin, and doxy. Started it in February. Immediately had symptoms subside, but then my doctor wanted me to pulse after only 4 weeks. Symptoms came back right away. One of the weirdest ones is internal vibrations. I have two questions. Does pulsing fit for what you wrote for treating Bartonella? Are these vibrations Bartonella? I don't believe I even had a herx during February, just struggling to get these symptoms to stop, and February gave me so much hope. Now I'm in on erythromycin instead of doxy and just don't know what's working. Okay. So first of all, that buzzing feeling is a neurologic irritation that is very common in Bartonella. Okay. It's not diagnostic of Bartonella, but it occurs in Bartonella. And I often find that as we get Bartonella under control, that buzzing will go away. Another common symptom that can be really give you good information about whether your Bartonella is under control or not if you have it. A lot of people with Bartonella have, in addition to neurologic irritation, giving the buzzing and the vibrating internal vibrations feeling, they also have a lot of anxiety, like just pervasive anxiety that feels like it's coming from within you. It's not because you're anxious about your illness or anything like that. It's more organic. It's just driving the show. And often as you get Bartonella under control, that anxiety will start to subsist as well too. Okay. All right. Now, I strongly do not agree with my colleagues who want to pulse for Bartonella. I could say it more strongly than what I just said, but I'll leave it at that. Here's what the issue is. So Bartonella, as I suggested, replicates every 24 hours. I suggested that earlier tonight. I'm not sure if you heard that part or not, but because it replicates every 24 hours and that period of time that you are off of your antimicrobials, guess what's happening to it? It's coming back, right? So I know there's a group of providers out there that want to pulse for Bartonella, but I think the majority of people do miserable on it, all right? And I have gotten, when I was practicing in Seattle, I often would get people that knew my position of saying, you don't pulse for Bartonella. And they would come out and see me after having failed seeing a number of these East Coast providers that want to just do pulsing for Bartonella. And we would just get them on months of continuous antibiotics and we'd clear up their Bartonella. All right. So you have evidence you could even, your doctor should at least be looking at what happened to you and not be so set on pulsing as the way. Your evidence is clear here. You did better continuously than you did pulsing. So why keep beating a dead horse with something that doesn't work? Not that you're a dead horse, wrong analogy, but you got my point. Why keep doing the same thing that you know did not work? Why not go back to what the experiment already showed you that works, which is using them continuously, okay? So I think you got to convince your doctor to change whatever the heck they're doing. I don't understand why they're doing it especially when you've got evidence that pulsing is not working for you. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Eileen. Let's see. Good evening, Dr. Ross. I have been fighting Bart and Lyme for several years. I also have Hashimoto's and a high reverse T3 and antibodies. I've just started low-dose naltrexone, 5 milligrams per day. My doctor knows I am very sensitive to most medications. I suspect you mean 0.5 milligrams a day, then I hope, because usually with low-dose naltrexone, we want to work up to 4.5 milligrams. So I assume you mean 0.5 milligrams. Okay. I hope so, at least. Anyhow, I'm various medications. I also have diverticulitis recently recognized. Will the LDN interfere with the diverticulitis? Thanks so much for all you do for us. You have helped my family so very much. Thanks again. Good. Well, I'm glad I've helped your family. Listen, so I've never seen any difficulty with people that have a diverticulitis and taking LDN. And I had a number of people in my practice that I would do that with. So I don't see any reason based on my clinical experience, but also just based on what I know about the illnesses and how LDN works to be concerned. Okay. All right. I think you'd be okay doing that. So everyone, I just want to say a few things here, and Eileen, you probably know this. So I want to talk about what Eileen has mentioned here. So Eileen's got thyroid illness, and specifically, she's got autoimmune thyroid illness, and she has something I call peripheral hypothyroidism too. And I want to explain what I mean by those, okay? So Hashimoto's is a type of thyroid illness where your body starts making antibodies that attack the thyroid tissues, okay? All right. And because of that, the thyroid can't make enough thyroid. Sometimes at the beginning, it'll make too much, and then eventually the thyroid gets injured and it burns out and it just doesn't make enough thyroid, okay? All right. All right. And so the naltrexone, which I mentioned earlier tonight, is very useful at helping to regulate these cells called Tregs, which then are able to balance Th1, Th2, and Th17 inflammation. Remember, Th1 are your cells that fight intracellular infections, viruses, and bacteria. Th2 are your cells that are involved in making antibodies and your mast cells, your allergy cells. And then Th17 are the immune cells that fight initial infections, okay? Autoimmune illness is thought to be due to too much Th1 and Th17. They get overly turned on and they start attacking your tissues as well too, okay? So if you can get the Tregs to work better, that's going to push down the amount of Th1 and Th17. It'll help raise up some of that Th2 levels. Some of that Th2 make cytokines that suppress Th1 and overactive Th17, all right? And you wind up eventually getting the autoimmune illness under control again. Okay, so again, autoimmune is due to too much Th1 and too much Th17, and the LDN, by working on Tregs, can help bring those down. Okay, all right. Then, what I mentioned here is that Eileen also has something called peripheral hypothyroidism. All right, so let me talk about that. So your thyroid gland, which sits up here in the neck, makes two kinds of thyroid hormone. One is called T4, and the other one's called T3. Okay, and there's a couple major differences in T4 and T3. First of all, the easiest one to explain is that T4 has 4 pieces of iodine on it, and T3 has 3 pieces of iodine on it. Okay, all right, so that's one. All right. Second difference, though, is that how much is made. So the 90% is T4, 10% is T3. And then the third difference is what drives your body. It's all the T3. So T3 is what makes your cells work, okay? And so what happens is all this T4 and T3 that's made up here, most of it's T4, gets into your bloodstream, goes out to your cells, and at the level of the cells, there's supposed to be an enzyme reaction that changes the T4 over to T3. Now, your T4, when it's going to these cells, has a choice, all right? So it can either go to the cells so it can get converted into T3, or it can decide not to become T3, and it can decide to park itself as something called reverse T3. And the reason so when you have all this excess reverse T3, because the body is not converting that T4 into T3 in the cells, that's called peripheral hypothyroidism, all right? And this reverse T3 doesn't help you. One of the reasons that people have explained that people may make too much reverse T3 instead of getting all that stuff into regular T3 is it's basically a hibernation response, right? So think of bears when they're under stress in the winter, when they're trying to protect themselves from the severe environment, they go to sleep to protect themselves, all right? In some ways, what may happen with people with chronic fatiguing illnesses is the body tries to shut itself down to go into hibernation so that it can allow the body to repair and heal. And it does so by not allowing all that T4 to get converted to T3, instead parking it as reverse T3, okay? So the way around that, the way you address that problem is, first of all, you work on getting your infections under control that may be triggering the autoimmune illness, all right? Number 2, you get on low-dose naltrexone. And number 3, you take T3 as your form of thyroid, not T4. And in this situation, I wouldn't even use desiccated thyroid, which is both T4 and T3. I would use just T3 as the form of thyroid. Okay. All right. All right. So I'm going to do a quick screen share here. And Eileen, I know that wasn't your question, but I wanted to explain to everyone the various terms you use there. Okay. So let me do a screen share here. All right. So in my online Lyme guide, take a look at my hormone section here. Somewhere here. There we are. And take a look at this article called It's Tricky, How to Diagnose and Treat Low Thyroid. All right. In here, I talk about reverse T3. I talk about peripheral hypothyroidism. I talk about low dose naltrexone. I talk about nutrients that you might want to take to help your thyroid work better as well, too. Okay. All right. All right. Good luck to you, Eileen. Thanks for the question. All right. Hold on here just a minute, everyone. All right. Let me get a sip of water here. Let's see. Hi, Irina. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you very much for your answers. You're welcome. I'm having borreliosis, Babesia, mycoplasma, and Bartonella, and have been taking herbal medicine for almost a year, prescribed by an herbalist. Read that again. Borrelia, Babesia, okay, so I see. Okay. While I am taking the herbs, I am fine, no symptoms, except 1 week in a month during my woman's period. Then I feel my muscle pain around my neck and sometimes on my arms. Also, I would feel it when I am using my phone for a long time, or stop taking the herbs. My questions are, is it possible to get rid of Lyme and co-infections without antibiotics, using herbs only, and how long does it take? Also, I want to get pregnant, and how do I know when it is safe to do it? What herbs or antibiotics are allowed during pregnancy, and is it safe for the baby in the long term after it's born? I mean, not at the moment the baby is born, but later in life. Could you share your experience with treating pregnant women if you have such? Thank you. Yeah, I can help you look at both of those. So herbal antibiotics do have a chance to get your tick-borne infections under control. All right. And compared to prescription antibiotics, there's a little bit of a difference. Now, for Borrelia, in my opinion and in my experience, I think you can have as good of a chance of good outcomes using anti-Borrelia herbal antibiotics as you can prescription antibiotics. All right. The odds that they're going to work, anything that you're on, any 2 or 3 herbs or any 2 or 3 prescription antibiotics you're on will work is about 90% of the time, whether they're oral or herbal antibiotics. Okay. That's for Borrelia, the Lyme germ. All right. For Bartonella, the herbal antibiotic combinations seem to work well about 75% of the time. The herbals do. And the prescriptions have a chance of helping you of about 80-ish, maybe to 85%. So you got about a 10% difference in potential outcome from using herbal versus prescription antibiotics with Bartonella, okay? For Babesia, the herbals tend to work about 80% of the time, and the prescriptives tend to work about 85% of the time. So you got a little bit of difference on the Bartonella Babesia, but they can still work, all right? Now, keep in mind, so then there's a few other things. So for 85% of people, Babesia takes about 4 to 5 months to get rid of. That means for 15% of people, it's a chronic infection that can take a year, 2 years, maybe longer, okay? Regardless of whether using herbs or prescriptions. And I'm telling you, this is based on my clinical experience, all right? For Bartonella, you can get rid of, for 85% of people, you can get rid of it in about 6 months. And for 15% of people, it's a chronic ongoing infection that could take months to years to get rid of. All right. For Borrelia, the average person with chronic Borrelia is going to require at least a year to 2 years to get over it. Right. And this is just based on my clinical experience. Okay. All right. So some things to think about if your herbals are not and then one other thing. So it's not uncommon. It's a very common thing that I've seen in my practice that women during their periods or leading into their periods will have some worsening of symptoms. All right. There is an occasional person, if it was really bad, the way that I would manage it is to have them be on continuous birth control pills so that they wouldn't have a period. And if you do that, you tend not to get that fluctuation and decrease in how you're doing around the time of your period. Okay. All right. So just want to keep that in mind. Okay. And then finally, some common things that will block your ability to get over Babesia and Bartonella and even Borrelia that you may or may not be addressing. All right. So first of all, Bartonella and Babesia can sequester themselves, hide themselves in your blood clotting protein called fibrin. Fibrin will wrap around the germs, and you get these kind of like nest of germs that are made up of fibrin encapsulating, wrapped around Babesia and Bartonella. All right. So one of the things you got to do is you need to make sure you're taking something that breaks up that fibrin. And what I like using for that is lumbrokinase. It's an enzyme made from the skin of earthworms. I love this crazy illness. Yes, we use earthworms. And it's a 20, you can get it either as a 16 or a 20 milligram pill. Allergy Research makes a 16 milligram. A company called Canada Research, which makes a product called Baluki, or Canada RNA, which makes a product called Baluki, makes a 20 milligram pill. They're interchangeable as far as I'm concerned, okay? But you want to see if you can work up to taking one of those twice a day to break up your fibrin nest, okay? The other thing that can limit your ability to get rid of Bartonella and Borrelia is if you're not taking herbs that also have effectiveness for both growing and persister form or hibernating forms of the germs. So keep in mind that both Bartonella and Borrelia have growing forms, and they have these sleeping hibernator forms, and the sleeping hibernators need their own special group of herbal or prescription antibiotics to deal with them. Okay, now, fortunately, we now know from research over the last couple of years that there are some antibiotics that we can use that have good effect against persister Bartonella and persister Borrelia. All right. And I showed you the article earlier, but here in a minute, I'm going to go back and look at the article again. I have this whole article that I did about the best herbal antibiotic approaches. And I have that table in there that says, does it treat growing or persister or both? Okay. So I'll show that to you again in case you missed that earlier. All right. Okay. Then, so then the other thing, one other thing. So then the other thing that can block your treatment of Borrelia and Bartonella, in addition to these fibrin nests, are slime layers called biofilms that can cover the germs. All right. And usually the herbal antibiotics and even prescription antibiotics have an ability to break up these biofilms, but not all the time. So sometimes you need to take additional substances that are going to break up the biofilms. That lumbrokinase can help because it breaks down the protein skeletons that hold these slime layers together, which is different than a fibrin nest. Okay. All right. But sometimes you need to take more than that. All right. And so there's a product that I will periodically add into my treatments that are when I'm having a hard time getting people to get fully over this, which is a product by Research Nutritionals, which is called BioDisrupt. It has a number of different herbal compounds in it but it doesn't have fibrolytics in it. It doesn't have anything that breaks up fibrin. It uses other herbs in it that go after biofilms through a multifaceted approach, basically. Okay. And that BioDisrupt is made by Research Nutritionals, and it's a couple pills twice a day. All right. So when I've got somebody that's not getting through their treatment well enough, I'm thinking about adding lumbrokinase in to deal with those fibrin nest. I'm also on top of that want to add in BioDisrupt, 2 pills twice a day to help with removing some of the biofilms. And then I'm going to want to reevaluate my herbal antibiotics to make sure I have people on things that are treating both growing and persister forms of the Borrelia and the Bartonella. Okay. We do not think that Babesia has these persister forms. I just want to answer that for you. Okay. All right. Then, in terms of pregnancy, regrettably, there are not adequate safety studies that have been done that show us whether it's safe for the developing baby to take herbal antibiotics during pregnancy or not. All right. So therefore, I have never used them during pregnancy. All right. We know from a pregnancy registry that was kept on the East Coast of the United States in the late 80s, early 90s, that women that had a chronic Borrelia or Lyme, or not even chronic, just Borrelia, not chronic Borrelia, but just Borrelia, whether it was acute or even chronic. If those women were on antibiotics at the time of their pregnancy, during their pregnancy, the baby did not, the risk of transmission was nearly 0% in the baby, okay? Likewise, in that registry, we found that approximately 50% of women would transmit Borrelia to their babies if they were not on prescriptive antibiotics that were safe to use at that time. Okay. So most of us these days, when a woman is pregnant, to prevent Borrelia transmission, will have a woman either take azithromycin, cefuroxime, or amoxicillin. Okay. All right. Now, in my practice, I tended to want to try to get rid of Bartonella and Babesia before pregnancy because there is not enough information about the safety of using chronic anti-Babesia or chronic anti-Bartonella medicines over the long term of a pregnancy to know whether they're safe to use or not. Okay. But in a pinch, if somebody's got active Babesia and they're pregnant, or they've got active Bartonella and they're pregnant, you can use rifampin during pregnancy for Bartonella. You can use azithromycin during pregnancy, and that helps with both Borrelia and Bartonella. You can also use atovaquone, which is known as Mepron, during pregnancy for active Babesia. But again, we don't have enough information to know whether it is a safe thing to do to prevent the spread of Babesia or to prevent the spread of Bartonella, to take it throughout a whole pregnancy. I tended only to use those if I had somebody that got pregnant and was experiencing a lot of symptoms of Bartonella or Babesia during pregnancy. Okay. All right. What I will tell you in my practice is when I treated and got people relatively well, got them through their Babesia and Bartonella symptoms, they may still have had Borrelia symptoms and they got pregnant, and we put them on the preventive antibiotics as I suggested here. They did quite fine. The babies did quite fine, and the mothers did quite fine as well too. Okay. All right. I hope that gave you enough information. There's a lot of information I just gave you there, but I hope that gave you enough. I want to show you my article on the antibiotics again here too, in case you missed it earlier, or the herbal antibiotics it is. All right, so I'll figure out where I stored it here. No, I guess I didn't do it there. So I'm just going to put in herbal antibiotics. Okay, so the article again is called Best Herbal Antibiotic Plans for Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia. And again, look at this table. I kind of give you an idea of, for instance, what is good for what. So for instance, cinnamon oil is great at treating growing Borrelia, persisting Borrelia, that's what the P stands for, and biofilm Borrelia. It can help with that as well too. Okay. All right. And anyhow, you can go through each of these and see, but look at this table. It gives you good information. Okay. One last thing. I know I mentioned that BioDisrupt product. So this is the BioDisrupt product. And again, it's made by Research Nutritionals. the key parts in it are, it's got, oh, I guess it does have a peptide. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So it does have some fibrinolytics in it. So the serrapeptidase, the protease, these things break up that fibrin, but then it relies on cranberry, berberine, rosemary, and peppermint oil and N-acetylcysteine to attack biofilms from many different angles as well too. Okay. So anyone, I haven't quite given this spiel yet, but this is my store. I welcome anyone that wants to order from my store. It used to be for my patients, but over time, it wound up becoming used by more people than my patients. And so it's still open. I still run the store out of Austin, Texas, and anyone can purchase from me. There's reasons to purchase from me. Number one, I have very fast and free shipping as long as your orders are over $50. Number two, I cover any state or local taxes that you might be susceptible for. Okay, I cover those if you're from one of those jurisdictions. And then number three, I'm blank on my third. I offer my products at the lowest amount allowed by the manufacturers. Okay, all right. And I welcome your business. All right. All right, let me go on here. All right, good luck to you, Ariane. Hello, Pedro G. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I've been on mold toxicity treatment for the last 3 weeks, given my real-time lab test results, positive across all 5 mold groups, and I don't feel any better. The treatment includes various binders and itraconazole. Let's see, 100 milligrams 3 times a week plus X-Layer nasal spray 2 times daily. I still have severe fatigue, muscle weakness, and extremely cold. My doctor wants to run further thyroid tests, even though TSH, T4, and T3 were normal limits. As I recently had a thyroid biopsy taken, given growth on the left side, results pending. What other thyroid tests are necessary to check thyroid function? Okay, I will answer that last part of the question, but I just want to make a comment here. 3 weeks is too soon to see any improvements. Usually people are going to get worse at first as you start pulling out those toxins and you start killing any possible mold spores. You're going to feel worse at first. And it can take sometimes even 4 to 6 months before you start turning around, even when treatment is working, okay? I don't say that to frustrate you. I'm sure it can, okay? I'm going to admit that. But I say that just so you know, it's not unreasonable that you have not seen any improvement yet, okay? And it's just a matter of staying in there. You're going to have to wait until you get enough of those toxins pulled out of you, and it's going to take time. It can take a good 4 to 6 months before you start seeing improvements, okay? All right. So hang in there, Pedro. I just want you to know that, all right? And then in terms of thyroid testing panels, I showed you earlier tonight the article that I have that I recommend. And in there, I talk about thyroid testing, but I'll just say it to you here. So I like doing TSH, free T4, free T3. I like to get a reverse T3 that I explained earlier tonight in another question that was asked. And then the last thing, and I'm using that reverse T3 to, again, look for peripheral hypothyroidism. And then I want to get TPO or thyroid peroxidase or TPO antibodies, which helps me understand whether there might be autoimmune thyroid disease as well too. Okay, those are the things I like to do. Okay, thanks for the question. Good luck. Hold on here a minute. Should I also see? Hi, Kelly. See, should I also do all the GI sleep COVID things you mentioned for Sonia? If you are having long COVID, so what I would urge you to do is take a look at my full protocol. All right, I focus on some specific aspects of it for Sonia, but you might want to read the whole thing and see if it applies to you. Okay, of which 2 of the cornerstone things to do to get over long COVID is clean up your GI system. The second one is get sleep. And for some people, be on tryptophan, as I mentioned, okay? Other steps that sometimes you need to do is to repair the lining of your blood vessels, because there's something called the endothelial glycocalyx, which is kind of the covering on the inside of your blood vessels that gets injured from COVID. And what that does is if the endothelial glycocalyx is not working correctly, you don't get enough creation of nitric oxide by the endothelial glycocalyx. Nitric oxide is needed to keep all of your blood vessels dilated further downstream so your antibiotics can get in and do the stuff they do, and so that your blood flow can help repair any tissue damage that happened as well too. All right. And so I mentioned that in the protocol, and what I like using for that is something called arterisol that has good benefit at repairing that endothelial glycocalyx. The other thing that I like doing to repair that tissue, and I mentioned it as part of what I said to Sonia, was to be on the BPC-157 as well too. All right. The other things I consider for people are doing mitochondrial repair by using a phospholipid mix that repairs the fat membranes of your mitochondria. That's called ATP 360. And I also want to get people on glutathione too. Take a look at that article, though, that I showed Sonia and see what you think about it for yourself. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Kelly. Hello, Carol. Let's see. Should you not take LDN if you have trouble sleeping? Not necessarily. So low-dose naltrexone has a side effect in that it can lead to insomnia. But because of that, I tended to use it in the morning, and for probably 95% of people, it did not affect their sleep at all. Okay. So a lot of it has to do with the timing of the day. For some reason, well, I know why, but US physicians tend to like to use it at nighttime versus Europeans have historically liked using it in the morning. The reason that US physicians tend to dose it at night, which disturbs the sleep in many, is that if you're blocking your endorphin receptors at nighttime, that causes the brain to make a bunch of chemicals that trigger the body to make more endorphins to overcome the endorphin blockade using naltrexone, okay? And that increased amount that your brain is making could then potentiate a natural surge in endorphin levels that happen at night. So at nighttime, you tend to make a lot more endorphins naturally. And so if you do your endorphin blockade at night, you even get a bigger surge of it. Okay, so technically that's what people think. However, it doesn't matter. You don't get there's no change in outcome. So I tend to have people take it in the morning, and they do well. Okay, they tend not to have, most of them, 95% tended not to have any insomnia issues, or it did not make their existing insomnia any worse. Okay, all right. Good luck, Carol. And thanks for the question. Hello, Nilafar. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I'm a female over 50 menopausal and with hypothyroid. I have Lyme, Babesia, and Bartonella. Also, my test was high on mycophenolic acid. I have been with the same doctor for the past 2.5 years, as I mentioned in the previous sessions here. I am not improving, and my current doctor advised me to take a break from my medications. I have been going without any medications for close to 2 months now. I am getting worse. Most of my symptoms are coming back. I am going to find another doctor, and until then, what do you advise I do to prevent me from getting worse? It doesn't seem I can do it on my own, as I'm facing something complex. Also, I live in North California, and I found Gordon Medical Associates of Dr. Eric Gordon, Steve Harris, and Dr. Nafsia Parpia. I'm really frustrated, as you can imagine. So before I start working with them and invest another round of thousands of dollars in my treatment, I would really appreciate your opinion on this clinic. Many thanks. All right. So Gordon is a good clinic. The doctors there are all quite knowledgeable. I think they're an expensive clinic. And I think regrettably, I think a lot of the California docs just charge excessively. They, whether it's God, who's the other one that's out there? I'm blanking. A lot of them have gone to these subscription models and their membership models, and they just make you pay exorbitant. And I'm sorry for that. I think it's a bit much. All right. So I have to admit that. But in terms of the work they do, Dr. Gordon is great. Dr. Harris is great. And Dr. Parpia is great too. I know these doctors personally. I also have managed patients that they had managed before that move up to Washington State, and I take over and I reviewed their care, and I think they've all done great work. Okay. So I think you'll be in good hands if you go there. Okay. All right. In terms of one thing I'm going to point out for you. So mycophenolic acid is, if you have mycophenolic acid, it means that you are still having exposures to mold. All right. Because it is one of the chemicals that's made by mold that is easily removed by the body. And it's easily removed. You don't have to use binders to get it out. The body actually clears that one out on its own. So if you're measuring it, if it's showing up, it means you're getting it exposed in your environment still. Okay. So the one thing you might want to go back and look at is your house all over again, your work environment, and just make sure there's no reasons that you're still being exposed. The other one is, it is possible you're being exposed if you've been colonized with mold spores up in your nasal passage, your intestinal passages, and they could be producing the toxins as well too. Okay, so I just want to point that out. I honestly don't know what to tell you to keep you from declining during this period, because I don't know, even though I know you have all of these things, I don't know enough about your whole health care to give you full-on advice about what to do. Okay, you may want to take a look at my Ross Lyme support protocol and see what parts seem to make sense to you. But in that protocol, as you know, I talk about, I talk about addressing sleep. I talk about lowering cytokines. I talk about all the essential steps you should do, and you should be doing those. Okay. In terms of which of your germs to treat, I know you've written here what you've had, but that doesn't tell me exactly what is still active in you. And to figure that out, I'd have to ask you a lot of clinical questions. So I'm sorry, I just can't give you good advice here. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Cindy. Let's see. Dr. Ross, I appreciate your thoughts on the use of prednisone tapers and steroid injections to control flare-ups of Lyme arthritis. Do you think these treatments make things worse? I always feel good the week they start, and for a few weeks later, then a month later, the pain is worse than ever. Any thoughts on what may work to get the pain under control without steroids? Boy, I hate using steroids. I mean, I understand the rheumatologists want to use it because it's a way of getting all that inflammation under control. The trouble is when you're doing body-wide, either pills or injections, that suppresses the immune system, which makes your tick-borne infections worse. You may want to talk with your rheumatologist about not using steroids, but using some of the other biologics that are available out there that are more targeted immune suppressors than knocking a hole in your whole immune system by using steroids. Okay. And there's a number of those, but you should talk with them to see if they would consider using biologic targeted immunosuppressants rather than using the sledgehammer prednisone approach. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. All right, everyone. That's it. I've enjoyed being with you here tonight, and I look forward to being with you again here next week. All right. So keep your eyes out on your email tomorrow morning, somewhere between 9 and 9:30 a.m. You'll get an email from me with a summary of what we talked about, as well as letting you know that the recording is ready to watch. Okay. In that email, you can sign up for the next week's webinar as well, too. And when you get that, share it with people. If you think you're getting benefit, other people will as well, too. All right. So for those of you that wish you had more contact with me, one of the things you should consider doing is joining my support group called Lyme United. And let me just do a quick screen share here for you. All right, let's see here. All right, so at my Treat Lyme site, click on my Lyme United tab. And this is where I explain about the membership support group that I run. We currently have about 80 members. And within the support group, there are a number of forums. And there are two where you specifically can interact with me, okay? One of those forums is something I call Office Hours with Marty Ross MD, where you can write questions to me daily. And I spend an hour each day answering questions that came in during the 24 hours before. Okay. So that's daily contact, except for on the weekend. In addition, I host a Zoom room question and answer session once a week. And that is called Ask Marty Ross MD Live. It's kind of like these webinars, but it's better because we can interact directly. And our other members also offer advice, and they have some good advice sometimes too. All right. So I urge you to take a look at this, go through this page and see if this is right for you. I'm looking for new members. All right. All right. Let's see here. All right. So with that, good night, everyone. I hope you all have a good week. Take care.